know there ain't no stopping us. Fly without a boarding pass. Couldn't catch me, I'll be moving fast. Call me a shooting star. Let 'em know who you are. Flying up in a bar. Wish on a star. Time to show 'em who's in charge. Call me a shooting star. Didn't even get to cross. I said I'm moving too far. Get to glass. Looking at a shooting star. Got more than a couple of people going mad. I swear they're rooting hard. Tell them I'd be big in the game like she went and got them breast implants. I said I'm moving too fast. Didn't even get to glance. I'm ready to eat up track like I'm seated in a restaurant. If you had swag like mine, you know it's best to flaunt. We aren't hating because you aren't. Shining like it's neon. Rock like kings of Leon. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When I turn up, then I just have to leave. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When I turn up, then I just have to leave. Yeah, shoot. Yeah, shoot.
Well, hello everyone. It has been a hot minute, hasn't it, since I've done one of these. And I've got, I'm just trying to do all my monitoring. Okay, because I've got everything, it's all set up in my little beauty little station here, and it's kind of cramped somewhat at times, but I think I've got everything set up pretty well. And there's a lot of clips, as there usually are. These tend to be the long shows, but I'm not so sure how long it will be tonight. Let me let you know what I have queued up. It doesn't mean we're going to get to it all. We'll see how I'm feeling, how you're feeling, how the discussion is going. I have first some clips that a patron had sent me from, well, they didn't send me the clips, they sent me the show, and I pulled out some clips where Sargon of Akkad was doing a little bit of a critique of libertarianism. Kind of, sort of, not really. Then I had some miscellaneous Dave Smith clips. I don't know where they came from. They were just labeled as something I needed to go over, so I don't even know what they are. And then a bunch of Dave Smith clips from a recent show where he was talking about Governor Abbott banning mandates of vaccine, of having vaccinated employees, vaccinated customers, whatever it might be. And I'm going to have a tiny bit of a respectful disagreement with Dave, meaning the disagreement is going to be a tiny bit. The respect shall be throughout. It isn't the respect that's tiny bit. I just realized that was weird. That could have meant either thing. So we're going to get started with this fairly soon. These types of shows, though, it's got to be participatory because I do expect it to be a conversation. Before we get started, I would like to do my shameless grifting and do a tiny wee bit of an LNC update. So, for the grifting, we are only a few days left in October. I haven't really tried to push my October goal, though some people have generously, without me even hardly grifting, have either upped their subscription or they have, and I haven't yet updated the end screen yet for the one patron who upped their subscription from $5 to $10. Thank you so very much. If you can help me meet my October goal, it's patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Also, tinyurl/Pink Flame merch. Conventions are coming up. I should have put the picture in here. I'll get it for next time. A friend of mine sent me a picture of the t-shirts they got in the mail, said, I've got my Empire State Liberty convention gear ready. And I was so thrilled. Now remember, I'm only going to be there on Sunday. I will be in Vermont on Saturday. But you need to get the... Yes, this is my boudoir, Fidalgo. It's where I get ready. It's an old entertainment center, actually, and I just love this setup my husband made for me. So, yes, I will be in Vermont on Saturday, Syracuse on that Sunday. But please do get your convention gear. tinyurl/Pink Flame merch. And yeah, I think we're ready to go. I've done my shameless grifting on these shows because they are marathons, generally speaking, and a bit unscripted. Super chats are always appreciated. So if you like what you're hearing, or you just feel like, throwing me some cheddar, I super appreciate it. Let's see what Olga had some. Oh, no, I thought that was Olga. I saw the O. It's offer. I'm not trying to change your gender. I thought it said Olga at first. I'm so sorry. So Malice had Sargon on. That'd be interesting. Sargon has changed quite a bit. I don't really watch him as much as I used to. I used to watch him quite a bit. And ever since it went to like that Island of the Lotus Eaters format, it's gotten a little bit too self-consciously serious for me. And I don't watch it as much. But a friend of mine did send me, and he's gotten a bit too right-wing for me, honestly, too. But I do enjoy him. I mean, I do think he's a very smart man who has very good insights. I probably should watch him a bit more. I tend to lately just stick with Dave Smith. Can't go wrong with Dave Smith. But I started watching Jimmy Snow again as well, and I didn't even know the whole drama happened with him and Gabby Hanna and Rachel Oates, and I guess Jimmy just got diagnosed with autism, so I'd like to watch his videos where he's talking about dealing with his diagnosis, because I think I could probably relate a lot there, and perhaps even offer him some words, not necessarily of wisdom, but of experience, being a couple years post-diagnosis myself, diagnosed also as an adult. But let's get right to the clips. Again, when I throw these up here, they might not be in the right order. It's always a little loosey-goosey. I believe the Sargon ones are first. Love to hear your thoughts. But let's go to the first clip. And for those of you who haven't been to one of these before, since I normally do these during the daylight hours, we talk and I put on my makeup because I'm usually preparing for another show. I'll be recording a show that will air tomorrow since I work tomorrow at my seasonal delivery job. This YouTube thing is still my primary job. So again, super chat's always welcome, and also patrons. But yeah, so I normally do it during the day. So I'm going to be recording something later, hopefully, unless I'm too tired, to air tomorrow. So you still have the daily content. But it's unusual for me to have pre-recorded content. All right, let's go to the first clip.
The problems that we have aren't really about liberties, because we have the complete liberty to be a total slave to our passions. That's not the problem.
Okay, I don't even know the context of that now. So he's saying that the problem isn't that we don't have liberties, because we have the liberty to be a total slave to our passions. Sargon gets far too much into moralizing for me, and kind of like and he's going to hate that I say this, and other people are going to as too, because so I'm not going to even, because I don't want to import wrong baggage, but kind of like in the, what was that? that lady from Rebel Media, the blonde lady, the Canadian, but kind of like in the trad mold, and he gets a bit too moralizing in that respect for me. Crap, what is her name? Lauren Southern. Too much like Lauren Southern for me sometimes. So, he's always, talking about, without saying the word degeneracy, I don't think, but like always talking about the degenerates. And perhaps as a degenerate, maybe that's why I get a little ass mad about it. I don't know. I just don't particularly care for it. But do we, in fact, have the liberty to be a total slave to our passions? I mean, I know he's saying that like in a sarcastic way, as if that's not a good thing. And I'm not saying whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's not a thing at all. We do not have the liberty to be at total slave to our passions. What if my passions were to smoke opium all day long? I mean, I'm not at liberty to do that. It's illegal. I mean, there's a lot of quote-unquote vices, which I think is what he's talking about, in being a slave to our passions, that we do not, in fact, have the liberty to have. So I do think a lack of liberty is, in fact, the problem. But what he is getting at is he thinks libertarianism fails because of a lack of a moral compass inherent in it. But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what libertarianism is. Libertarianism is not a complete moral system. Now, I know the Libertarian Party has lost its way with this, and I think this is going to be coming up in a Dave Smith clip. And I lost my way with it a little bit as well a few years ago when I was defending that a political party at least had to be a little bit thick. If you don't know the debate between thin libertarianism and thick libertarianism, we'll probably get into that into a little bit. But I now step back from that. I actually don't think that is necessarily the case. In fact, I think that's causing a lot of the problems that we have in the party right now. And Fidalgo says, there's a quote from Dune in that regard: seek freedom and become captive of your desires. Seek discipline and find your liberty. That sounds very like a proverb, not so sure if I agree with it. I don't know. I would have to see more specific examples. But let's continue now with Sargon.
Arguments from liberty are hollow these days. That's the problem. And it's not that there aren't loads of liberties that we're losing. Look at the COVID tyranny that is being imposed now. I can't travel. I can't leave this country at this point because I'm not vaccinated. It's not that I think there's anything wrong with the vaccines either. Like, millions of people have been vaccinated. If people are dying in the streets, I'd be like, okay, then maybe there's a problem, folks. But okay, don't get me wrong, there are people who have had negative side effects, but these are a tiny, tiny minority. The reason I don't get vaccinated is because the attitude. I just don't like the attitude.
I agree with him. I also am not vaccinated. And I don't have really a problem with the vaccines. I mean, I don't exactly trust them, but that's not my primary reason. My primary reason is peevishness. I don't like the attitude. And it's nice to hear someone who's not a libertarian also have that reason. Because, I've seen plenty of what some would call blue-pilled libertarians really mocking those that have like this really oppositional defiance against the state. I just don't like the state telling me to do it. I just don't. And yeah, it's worth it to me to take that risk. It is. That small little act of defiance is, in fact, worth it to me. You can think it's silly all you want. I don't care. Now, so he says that arguments from liberty are meaningless today. Maybe to some people, and maybe they aren't as persuasive as they could be. But that's a utilitarian or consequentialist observation. It doesn't have much to do with the truth value of liberty or not. And I know I'm taking clips of his out of isolation of his larger argument, but I'm trying to make, points of my own that are lateral to the points that he is making.
But that's not the question. The civil right to be a sugar baby, is that good? Like, is that what civil rights were for? No.
Wrong. 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 Oh my God. I'm triggered. So, he's making a moral judgment, and that is fine. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing to be a sugar baby. I've got other things to worry about than to waste my time making moral judgments on sugar babies. But he said, is that what civil rights are for? Yes. If civil rights aren't for vices and things other people don't approve of, then there is no point. We can analogize to free speech. Is freedom of speech for the lovely speech, or is it for the ugly speech? What needs to be protected? What needs to be an actual right? The things that are not as popular. So, right there, I think, is where we have our fundamental disconnect, Mr. Akkad. The idea, the right to be a sugar baby, yes. Yes, that is in fact what civil rights are for. You don't need a civil right to be the neighborhood happy-go-lucky father. You need to have rights protected to be the things that not everybody cares for.
Because I've been reading the Federalist Papers recently, actually. And I think, why? Why was I reading that? It's like, yeah, I know. Just 'cause I never have, actually. Right? It's just I never have. But the problem is that you can tell it's a very different society that Jefferson, Madison, I think it is, that are writing for. And it's not one that has Coomerism like we have now. It's not one that has unfettered capitalism like we have now. They're enterprising, obviously, and they want free enterprise, but it's a whole different world. And they were also deeply religious people, and this meant that they had a morally informed worldview that had metaphysical boundaries. You didn't become a heroin addict or a coomer or, a sugar baby or whatever, because there was something moral holding you back. And that morality is not found in the books that Steve Baker is presenting. It has to be assumed or lent back on in some other way. And without it, again, the communists can just open the door and say, well, we'll just go for it. Why not? And you're like, well, I mean, the libertarians aren't telling me why I shouldn't do that.
Because libertarianism, that's like saying the libertarians aren't telling me the best recipe to make a chicken pot pie. Because that's not what libertarianism is for. You're expecting libertarianism to provide you a complete moral system. And it's just not what it's for. It's as ridiculous as saying it doesn't give you a particular recipe. But here he is. He's doing that very typical conservative thing of lionizing the past. You weren't a heroin addict in the past. Oh, really? Well, I beg to differ with you there. You could buy laudanum off the drugstore shelf, which was basically a heroin derivative, and there were plenty of people, Mr. Akkad, that were heroin addicts back then. I don't know where you got that from, but, all of this, you wouldn't do this and you wouldn't do that. Okay, yeah, but you would own black people, okay? You wouldn't agree to outlaw slavery from the beginning in the founding documents of the country because it was worth more to you to get the country going than it was to honor the humanity of black people. So don't be holding up this time as this vaulted, sense of morals. We have our problems. They had their problems. And all things considered, I believe we are morally much more progressed today than they were then. So how this backward glance that you have, I don't think is particularly justified. Yes, it was a different time. It might have been better in some ways. It might have been worse in some ways. I can tell you as a woman, I do believe we have morally progressed. I would not want to be a woman back then. I hate to pull the privileged white male card thing because I'm like not that kind of person, but I think it's somewhat apropos here. I don't think there are a lot of people who would agree with you that it was so much morally better society for everybody then. And to say there wasn't unfettered capitalism, they sold human beings. Like, how wasn't it? Like, and forget about, like, let's even just talk about moral things you could sell. It wasn't unfettered capitalism? Where in the world did you get that? How wasn't it unfettered capitalism? Now, it was pre-industrial revolution, so it was a different kind of capitalism, but you gave no examples. You simply made assertions and then had this big critique of these economic texts or just basic libertarian texts that your interlocutor was promoting and going, yeah, but the communists can just say these books don't tell me how to behave morally. They do up to a point. They tell you not to initiate force, and that's a damn good start. That's a better start than they had in the beginning of the country in these Federalist Papers that you're so lionizing. But those books aren't meant to give you a complete moral system. That's not what libertarianism is about. Within the realm of don't hit people and don't take their stuff, there's a lot of room for different moral views. There just simply is. And to me, that's a feature and not a bug of the system. I want to take a look at comments. You see here? Libertarians, so David Davis says, did it up on the screen? Yes. Libertarians can agree on parts of the non-aggression principle. Lack of agreement doesn't mean that it isn't something, though. I can find people who disagree on nearly everything. Is helping to defend others on a personal level a violation of non-aggression principle? No, and I've never heard anyone argue that it was. So if you have, that's a rarity. Because I dare say that I talk to an awful lot of libertarians. So no, helping to defend others who want you to defend them, let's add that caveat, on a personal level is not a violation of the non-aggression principle. Because you are allowed to ask others to be your agents, to defend on your behalf. And as long as the defense on your behalf is just, then no, it's definitely not a violation of the non-aggression principle. And literally, I've never heard anyone say it was.
But I mean, like the argument here is purely from the materialistic libertarian perspective of their civil rights. Oh, I can't believe the Taliban are forcing them into these rehabs. What about their civil rights? Okay, dude. Okay. So that's what we're concerned about, is it? We're not concerned about their health, about their happiness, about their well-being, about their families who might, like, you know, they've probably got parents and brothers and sisters who care about them, who want them helped, or something like this. This is not how they're supposed to be, but from the Western materialist lens, you can't argue against it. You have to argue from a metaphysical lens.
There was so much... I'm sorry, this is like one of the worst arguments I've ever heard Sargon make. Political philosophy is not going to be religious, and I would hope we would all be happy about that. But that's not to say it's not metaphysical, because libertarianism does make a metaphysical claim that people have rights. Now, how you ground them is a whole other matter, and some do ground them on religious basis, but I really don't want my basic political philosophy to be infused with religion. But my basic political philosophy isn't my entire life worldview like he is pretending it is for people. Of course, you've got to bring in other things. But him mocking, so we're concerned about people being forced into rehab, so we're concerned about their civil rights. Yeah, you're damn right I'm concerned about their civil rights. And he goes, well, aren't you concerned about their health or their happiness? If I don't know these people, who am I to be overweening, and overbearing to decide that I know better, I care more about their own health than they do. I care more about their own happiness than I do. And I'm going to impose my standards on these people and say what I think is best for their health and their happiness should override their civil rights. No, the only thing we can know objectively for other people is what their rights are. And as far as the happiness of the family that cares about them, then let their families that actually care about them do that. Not complete strangers paternalistically from afar saying, well, I'm going to decide that your civil rights should be subjugated because I'm concerned about your health. What? No, you got it completely ass backwards, dude.
Oh, let's raise taxes. We'll spend. This is fine. We'll do what Jeremy Corbyn would do if he was in government. And so Steve Baker is sat there just crying into his Hayek and Popper and Nozick and Mises and Humour. I've not read Humour, but I've read the rest of them. And the problem that he has with all of this is that these are all materialist texts. And so they can do nothing but present freedom. And freedom is a materialist concept.
He has this weird thing now, like, okay, so are you now saying that the only people that can have any kind of meaningful worldview have to be religious? I mean, so... And I don't think freedom is a strictly materialistic concept. The outworking of it, the securing of it might be, because we are, as Madonna said, I'm a material girl living in a material world. Of course, you know, we're not floating about as sheer spirit, but is freedom itself sheerly materialistic? The protection of it might be, but the outworking of it isn't. I mean, even if you want to go to religious texts, what does Jesus say? You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Knowledge is not materialistic, but certain knowledge does, in fact, make you free even while in a prison. Prisoners who find God will tell you they've never felt more free. So it's just not true that freedom is a strictly materialistic concept, though the protection of it is. Now I'm going back to Dave Davis. He has said, I do think on a personal level that people do have a right to defend others if they want to be defended. But I've heard a few suggest that if you or I saw someone attacking a weaker person, that intervening on the victim's behalf violated the net. Well, then they're just wrong. There's no logical sense in which that would be the case. I mean, I've heard people say that they've heard the Virgin Mary talk to them out of their bathtub drain, but that doesn't make me think that there really is some kind of serious, disagreement on the nature of talking to the Virgin Mary or of bathroom drains.
Freedom is essentially, in the end, usurped by the communists, because the communists promise more freedom than they promise.
Well, they might define freedom differently, and I would grant him there that in politics we do deal with a world of competing promises, but the communists do not promise more freedom properly defined. So, I'm not really quite too sure what point he was getting at there. I can tell his overarching point is that you need something in addition to libertarianism in order to have a complete fulfilled life, or even a complete functional society. And I would agree with him. Libertarian dystopia is in fact possible. But non-dystopia, utopia, as you were, will be different for each person. And that's why you would have multiple societies. And he always seems to be making the argument that it is pretty universally the same for everybody, or it should be. And it's not. His very strict, leaning much more towards the right version of morality is not, morality is not even the right word, because I think we have a lot of similar morals, but ideal living or flourishing living is not the same as mine. I would not be happy in his ideal world, and he would not be happy in mine. And that's okay. And we actually share a lot of ethics, and it still would be different. But this weird, like, religious kick he seems to have been getting on lately, I just don't get. But the criticisms he's making of libertarianism are straw men, in my opinion. You know? Just saying. So whoever had asked me to take a look at this, if there's something I'm missing that you would still like me to address, I would love to. But I think he is attacking a straw man here. And besides attacking a straw man, I think there's something he said that he had fundamentally wrong. He had two things fundamentally wrong when he asked if civil rights are really there so that people can be sugar babies, and the answer is yes. And if someone's a drug addict, are we really going to be so concerned that forcing them into rehab is violating their civil rights? Yeah, we are. I think now. And Davis, after I said that, I realized I might have been a little brusque. I didn't mean it that way. I hope it didn't come off that way. Sometimes I get like on a roll, and I realize that I feel like we're in the same room, but it probably feels very different on your end, and I don't ever mean to be brusque or patronizing, so please forgive me if it came off that way. Okay, I think... Well, let's just see what we're up to. We might have a couple more Sargon things. And at the end, I think we have one more Sargon clip. Let me check here. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the sort of libertarian perspective does get checkmated. It gets trumped by the communists. And so the libertarians have been totally
What did you do,
blown
Wayne?
the fuck out on every point,
Yeah, I want that.
unfortunately. Now, this is not an attack on libertarianism or anything like that. I have many libertarian sympathies myself. I want a minimal state. I want it kept as far away from me as possible, etc., etc. But the point is that Steve is unable to challenge the problems that we have because he is unable to really see the problems that we have.
Okay, I'm going to go back to that clip because my husband brought me a burnt pizza. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to be eating the pepperoni off of this, but I kind of got very, very distracted and missed that whole clip. So let's go backwards and let's hear that again.
And at the end of the day, the sort of libertarian perspective does get checkmated. It gets trumped by the communists. And so the libertarians have been totally blown the fuck out on every point, unfortunately. Now, this is not an attack on libertarianism or anything like that. I have many libertarian sympathies myself. I want a minimal state. I want it kept as far away from me as possible, etc., etc. But the point is that Steve is unable to challenge the problems that we have because he is unable to really see the problems that we have.
Okay, I don't think he demonstrated that at all. But I don't know his friend Steve. Maybe his friend Steve is quite that clueless that he doesn't see whatever problems that we have. But I think he's overstating the case where he says that the problems would not be solved by the philosophy that Steve is advocating, because I think the minute you take using state force against other people, you've just there solved about half of the problems. So what I think throughout these clips is Sargon made a lot of very broad pronouncements, bemoaned the fact that basic libertarian texts aren't complete moral textbooks, and then declared that libertarianism doesn't have any answers to these particular problems, but it doesn't pretend to have all of the moral answers. I need you to shut that door, Wayne, and everyone is laughing. Okay. So yeah, if anyone here has some comments as to what they think the ultimate, point there was, besides them just saying you're not going to find the complete ills to all of society's problems in basic libertarian texts, I'm not really quite too sure what his problems were, or what his issues were. If his only point was in saying that man cannot live on a sheerly materialistic philosophy. Well, as a religious person myself, I do agree with him. But any basic political philosophy is going to have that problem. And libertarianism can exist quite peacefully with having added on top of it, a religious worldview, whereas communism cannot. So it seems to me, in fact, at its fundamental premise that he's talking about, libertarianism would checkmate communism. I don't know. What am I missing here? Oh, I said before we continued, I had wanted to do something before we continued with the Dave Smith thing. I had meant to give you guys an LNC update. So, there's a compromise motion that was suggested. Not the motion wasn't suggested. The idea of trying to find a compromise was suggested by the Judicial Committee Chair, Mary Rohr, who I respect tremendously. And I do agree with her that that is in the best interest of the party, capital P party, even if it wasn't in the best interest of either individual parties, meaning myself or any particular members of the LNC. So a compromise motion had been worked on, and it is now, part one of it is being voted on the LNC. It appears that some LNC members, though, don't understand what compromise means, and particularly our Region 1 representative seems to think that it's a compromise to just say, well, you don't get reinstated. You just resign and, go away, basically. And we'll put somebody who you agree with caucus-wise in your place, as if that's my main concern. Maybe he just fundamentally doesn't understand what the word compromise means, or maybe he just fundamentally doesn't understand what my concerns were. Like, my concerns are not having some particular caucus balance on the LNC. When I got elected, I wasn't elected under any particular caucus. I was elected as a free agent, pretty much. Wayne, the dog is barking. I'm going to go let the dog out. Give me 1 sec. Go on, let's go out. Come on. Go on, both of you. Wayne, you can't come in here when I'm recording it. Just mess everything up. Come on, Gina. Come on, Gina. Okay. All right, I'm back. He got me off my groove. So yeah, my concern wasn't a particular caucus balance. So that's not a compromise. Something that does not involve my reinstatement is not a compromise. And saying that you'll reinstate, that you'll put somebody in who's somebody I would agree with, well, that's all fine and good, but that person wasn't elected by the delegates. I was. I don't think he understands that this is a matter of principle for me. I will never concede that I was justly removed, and I don't expect them to ever concede that they unjustly removed me. We're never going to agree upon that, and I won't insist upon it. But I am the duly elected secretary, and something that does not involve reinstating me to my elected position is not a compromise, and it is not something that I will entertain. I did entertain my reinstatement with some initial conditions. And that is about all I think anyone can expect. And I'm willing to renegotiate some of the initial conditions, lateral moves, but it's not a compromise, something in which they get their entire way and get to get rid of me unjustly. That's not a compromise. And that is not at all respectful to the delegates. So that's where we are at right now. I don't consider any offer that does not reinstate me to my position a compromise. I consider an absolute bad faith in trying to have your cake and eat it too. Or have your burnt pizza and have it not be burnt. I don't know. Whatever that might be. So that's where we are at right now. But I would like to say that the way Mr. Lucchini communicated this to another person had a threat in it as well. It wasn't just, oh, you resign and go away. It was, she resigns and I'll let her keep her committee seats. And I'm sorry, that's an implicit threat, like you're going to try to remove me from my committee seats that I've earned and I'm on. Like, that's not even a question. My committee seats were not impacted except for the ones that require you to be an LNC member, which was just APRC. So don't give me that, you'll let me? Really, Mr. Lucchini, that's the way it's going to go. Okay. Well, you have the upper hand here. You can do what you would like, but I don't need you to let me do anything, and I am not resigning my seat. If you find it impossible to work with me, you can resign. That's my compromise to you. You can resign. You don't like that, do you? Right, because that's not a compromise. All right, well, that's where we're at, though, and there are plenty of people on the LNC working in good faith. I'm just letting you know that particular offer has been soundly rejected. And I said in no uncertain terms that nobody should ever come at me again with a sentence that begins with, you resign, because that will never happen. In that particular circumstance, as I have always been willing to do, I am willing to leave my fate in the hands of the JC or Reno if necessary. I was always willing to do that. This negotiations that are happening now is because the JC chair asked me to. And I respect her and love the party enough to try. And any negotiation that starts with you resign is not coming from somebody who is operating out of love of the party. They're operating out of love of their own comfort. Okay. It definitely is in my best interest if I were to just win the JC appeal, and I might win it. I'm willing to forego that for the sake of the party, or at least forego the chance that could happen, because we don't know. I could lose, I could win. We're both taking risks. But I was duly elected by the delegates, and I am not going to disrespect the delegates in that way. And no matter what happens here, and I know some people will not like me saying this, but I don't hide things. No matter what happens here, let's just say the negotiations fall through and I lose my JC appeal. Let's just say the absolute worst of all circumstances for me, potentially. Though I don't know if losing my JC appeal is actually the worst. As I said, people love a martyr, and going into Reno as a martyr might even be of more advantage to me if you're thinking in a Machiavellian sense than winning the appeal. Obviously, I want to win the appeal. But worst situation, the negotiations fall through, I lose the JC appeal. I've already said, I do not recognize the unjust decision of a rogue LNC. And I will continue to perform my duties that I was elected to do to the best of my ability in my limited capacity being forcibly removed from my duly elected position. Meaning, there will be somebody appointed in my place, but I will continue to do minutes. I will continue to track votes. I will continue to assist state chairs. I will continue to author convention manuals. I will continue to do everything I would have done, just I won't be able to do it officially. People can accept my help unofficially, or they can reject it, and it would be completely up to them. But I serve the delegates, and I will continue to serve the delegates no matter what. And if anyone finds that rude or defiant, they're going to have to find that rude or defiant. I was elected to do a job, and I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities. I would prefer to do it in the seat I was elected to be in. And again, I am willing. If you look at the compromise motion, you can see I conceded quite a bit for the sake of peace. But that's about it. And I hope cooler heads that are interested in the good of the party will prevail. Because let me tell you, the compromise motion has me not being restored to full duty until January 1st. If LNC members cannot work with me for 5 months, where almost everything is going to be convention preparation, then perhaps it's their own suitability for those seats that's in question, because you have to be able to work with difficult people if you're going to be in politics. And I'm just conceding for the sake of argument that I'm just this terribly difficult person. I can work with them. So problem's not on this end, and you don't have to be best friends with everybody. So I hope everything works out. I hope the negotiations go through, again, for the sake of the party. And I believe if the LNC models a way to come to an agreement, it will be a great example for these troubled affiliates we're starting to see that are having their internal conflicts. That if we can work it out, they can work it out, rather than going the nuclear route, rather than going the witch hunting route. Okay. All right, let's continue.
There's been
comparisons,
and I guess I've made these comparisons myself too, from the COVID passport to the social credit system. And you start to realize after a while, and I feel this way a lot about like the same way you'd be kind of like, well, statism is kind of like a religion, or like social justice warriorism, wokeism is kind of like a religion. But the more you go through that, you're like, oh no, it's not kind of like, it just is one. It is. That's what it is. Which, with everything, with its rituals and mythologies and it's the same thing. This is what you're doing. You're literally performing like, like ritualistic dances, basically. And you realize it right now. It's like, the COVID passports aren't like a social credit system. They're not the gateway to a social credit system. It is a social credit system. That's what it is. It's that you basically comply, with the government edicts. You dance when they say dance, and then you get access to stuff. That's it. That's what this situation is. And when that happens, you're like, fuck. Well, the right thing to do there seems like not complying.
I was muted. Okay, here we go. I think he's exactly right. I think we have downplayed the similarity. We keep saying that this is on the road to fascism, or this is on the road to a social credit system, when it is in fact a social credit system. Just because it doesn't look exactly the same as the Chinese system, well, generally they're not carbon copies. It is. And when death is here giving us good vibes, how can we be anything but happy? So I think that point was exactly on point. And I don't think, if anything, I think we are downplaying how bad things are. I don't think we can possibly overplay how bad things are, which again, just so highlights. Why isn't this point being made daily from the rooftops by the National Libertarian Party? That's my question. That's been my complaint. Though they obviously have gotten worlds better with Larissa Gahn as our communications director. But oh my goodness, like when we really step back and just think of how much the world has changed so quickly. But he is exactly on point here. And I did want to go back to the LNC thing 1 second, because there's something I'm really realizing here. That's the ultimate danger. Okay, most of you guys know me as somebody, I have very little filter, and that's what gets me in trouble, right? Because I have no filter. But with the way they've acted and the authoritarian just witch hunt removal, actions that they've taken, and the psychological games that they have played with me, even I am finding myself self-censoring. Me. And I'm very difficult to censor, but I am finding myself self-censoring and constantly second-guessing everything I say. This is not a good precedent. What are you going to do with the next person who has some ethical problems with leadership at the national level, who doesn't have quite the lack of, like, I really, for the most part, don't care what people think about me. Like, I was raised that way. Like, I'm not very self-conscious. Now, take somebody who's more self-conscious and more reserved and more likely to not say everything that they want to say. If they've intimidated me into self-censorship, they're going to completely silence a person like that. And that does not bode well for the future of our party. It really does not. And I'm kind of embarrassed and ashamed of myself that I'm allowing them to intimidate me a little bit into self-censorship. I've got to really process that a bit in my head. All right.
Anyway, it's a real thing, man. And I'll say, by the way, that I should, if there's one thing I'm guilty of, and I've gotten some criticism from people online about this, and I think they're probably right that we should have been talking about Australia more on the show. And I guess, as I've definitely mentioned it several times, but I guess I don't know what to say other than the obvious thing to say, which is that the country has become a brutal totalitarian police state. Literally with martial law in some of their biggest cities, just horrific stuff. And to me, the real takeaway from it is that it's not as if this is like some war-torn third world country. This is fucking Australia. Like, just a year ago was a I guess more than a year now, but 2 years ago was a relatively free country. Okay, not bad gun laws and bad, some bad economic policies, but relatively, on the broad scope of human history, a relatively free country.
With some of the sluttiest hot chicks in the world.
At least when they come over here, Rob.
I mean, when they export those women here.
But I mean, you look at what they've become now, and I'll tell you see some of these fucking videos of the people resisting now, and you're like, God damn. Like, this is like the thing, right? And being a Jew whose family, went through the Holocaust, and really only one member of it came out of the Holocaust. The lesson, the eternal lesson of the Holocaust was always, don't wait till you're on the fucking boxcar. You know what I mean? The problem, the big mistake that the Jews made, which everybody basically concedes at this point, including the Jews themselves, is they fucked up by going, well, it's not going to get to that level. He's not just going to fucking kill all of us. So just like, all right, go along. He's going to fucking deport all of us, I guess. We'll figure it out. We'll get in somewhere else. And they just kind of went step by step by step by step. And the point that I'm making, the connection to all of this from, like New York City being here, Australia being here, Nazi Germany being, out there, is that you're like, even when you see them resisting in Australia like that, man, you'd much rather resist now than wait till you're at that point and have to start fucking, like, what are your options there? I mean, look at Australia as a fucking country where they're basically largely disarmed and under martial law. So what the fuck can you do then?
And that is an excellent point. We always tend to think it's like, well, it's not going to get worse than this. It's not going to get worse than this. It's not. And before you know it, it's worse than this. And it's too late. The time to really fight back and resist is now. And this is going to seem to contradict a point I'm making later. And I'm beginning to realize that, and maybe I need to revisit my position. I'm always willing to, revisit my position when I start to see that maybe it's not entirely consistent. So you'll see what I mean. But I mean, doesn't that, I don't know, those are some very powerful points, I think. Would really be interested in what you think at this point. But yeah, you can't wait until you're on the boxcars, right? It's too late then. So what's the point before it's too late? Well, the point before it's too late is always right now, because it's not too late yet, right? You have to wait till it's exactly the point before too late? Really look at what's going on in Australia. It is absolutely freaking insane. And those were 2 clips from an earlier show. Those were the 2 that I had just sitting around that said I need to respond to them. But now we're going to go toward the more recent one that's probably going to be a little controversial. And it's my amicable disagreement with maybe Dave on his points when it comes to Governor Abbott's banning of mandatory vaccination. So let's continue. Oh, and before, again, we get there, just kind of like mid-show, always reminding, super chats indeed are always welcome. And I can't tell you guys how much I've appreciated your moral support during this whole thing with the LNC. Remember, this all started on June 18th. That was Richard's first motion to try to remove me. And we're now at the end of October. And I'm wondering why, I sometimes wonder why my nerves are frayed, and then I remember it's been 4 months solid of this stuff. And then I don't wonder why my nerves are frayed anymore.
And there's something really interesting about this to me, and really interesting about the Libertarian response to this development. So this got a lot of people, the Libertarian Party, Twitter account, and Justin Amash and some other big libertarians were bashing this for libertarian reasons, you know, because, well, this is a violation of private property rights, and you know, you don't have a right to tell a business what they can and can't do, and that is true by technical libertarian, you know, philosophy. A business has the right to say, we don't want to hire people who aren't vaccinated, or we want to make our employees get it, or all of this stuff.
Got me mid-bite. Hold on. Let me finish my bite of pizza. This isn't a mukbang. And I'm trying to let my eyeliner dry. First world problems. Okay. So, he's acknowledging that there is, in fact, a libertarian argument to be made that it is not correct to tell a business that they can't require a vaccine, you know, proof of vaccination. Just like you can't require a business to say they must. And when I say can't, I'm obviously not referring to ability, because apparently, you know, obviously businesses are doing that. When I mean can't, I mean you can't do so justly, at least under libertarian principles. If you do it, you're an aggressor. You know, you're a wrongdoer. So his issue is, or the issue as it's laid out is, Governor Abbott of Texas has said businesses cannot require their employees to be vaccinated in contravention to Biden saying that businesses with over 100 employees do have to have it. And he's pointing out that, yeah, I mean, it's a violation of property rights either way. Okay, so we've got it set up. Now let's see what the comments here has been. Otto says, I'm trying to get my cursor over here. I want to put this up on the screen if I can. So Otto says the state has always been a religion since civilization began. I agree. I mean, man is made to worship and will worship something just as a result of human nature. Okay, so yeah, I agree with you on that, Otto. So let's continue now with Dave.
But I got to tell you, I'm okay with it. And it's been an interesting thing to kind of think this through and realize that, you know, whether this is perfectly libertarian or not, and the answer is it's not, we don't live in a perfect libertarian world. And we live in a real threat right now to liberty in this country. And seeing people fight back against it kind of makes me happy. And I'm not going to spend any time complaining about it.
Okay, didn't go to the next scene.
I think that.
Whoops.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I think it's
Okay, there we
very
go.
different.
That's what I wanted, and I don't want to mess.
And
It's messing up.
It's been an interesting thing to kind of think this through, and realize that, you know, whether this is perfectly libertarian or not. and
Okay,
the answer-
I gotta stop it there. Let me cap this eyeliner here. Oh, I don't want it to, let me pull this off. Okay. I don't know what happened where I couldn't get it to go to just my face, but we'll just keep it right here. Okay, here's where I start to have the disagreement with Dave, at least in part and respectfully. When I hear him say, yes, it's a violation of property rights, but I don't have a problem with it because I agree with the objective. I'm not saying it's the same. All I'm saying is what my mind goes to is, you know, I don't think it's right to punch a Nazi. But you know what? I don't have a problem of it. And I'm not going to cry any tears over it. Oh boy, we've got a mature person in our chat. Are any of my channel mods here? If not, let me go take care of this myself. If you want to just give me one moment. So, oh my God, why? Uh-oh, I'm about to lose battery. Hold on 1 second here. Something's not plugged in. Okay, let's see if that's going to keep my battery going. All right, I plugged it back in. It's probably going to take a while to recharge here. So, I am sorry, you guys. I should have checked that ahead of time. But, let me see what I can do here. Let me close this 1 second. Let's just stand at ease and parliamentary speak for a few moments while the battery fires back up. And in the meantime, I am going over to my YouTube channel. And okay, I removed Mr. Potty Mouth there, hopefully. Okay, now let's see if we can continue. So if anyone here is one of the channel mods, if he comes back, if I did not manage to remove him, if you could please take care of that. But I think I did. I need more channel mods for certain. All right, so let's finish. So that's what I hear. I hear, you know, it's not okay to punch a Nazi, but I'm not going to cry any tears over it. And, you know, I know it's not the best analogy, but if a principle of freedom is being violated, even if it's for something that you think is good, I do think it's incumbent upon us to say something about it. Now, it doesn't mean it needs to be your biggest priority that you're going to jump up and down over, I don't cry any tears over a punched Nazi either, but I'm not going to be silent in the face of aggression against someone for saying an unpopular opinion. And the fact that a business owner might want to do something with their private property that I don't agree with, such as requiring a vaccine for their employees, that doesn't give me the right to turn a blind eye when the state is saying they can't. Because remember, all laws are enforced at the point of a gun. So are we going to say then that it would be okay? Like, remember the comment I made that everyone had, they laughed about when I said Gary Johnson wants to kill people for fucking cakes because he wanted to force bakers to bake gay wedding cakes, and ultimately, with laws being enforced at the point of a gun, meant that he had to be willing to kill somebody. So, are anybody who said that I wouldn't say anything, or I'm okay with it, or I'm not going to say anything about this, are we okay with a business owner being killed, ultimately, or having other violence committed against them for wanting to use their property in that way? Perhaps that business owner has a compromised relative that they're trying to keep safe. I mean, there's all kinds of other reasons they may want to do this. And I don't think we can turn a blind eye at a violation of liberty just because it is accomplishing something we approve of. Because the power that you grant to the state to do something that you approve of will eventually be used to do something you don't approve of. That's a lesson we libertarians should know extraordinarily well. Now, I understand it's not quite as pristine as that, because what Governor Abbott is doing is in reaction to the federal government's initiation. Okay. But I don't think by, I got eyeliner in my tear duct there. I don't think the answer is firing a exactly inverse round of aggression. I just don't think that's the answer, and I don't think we should be applauding it. I also don't think we can horse trade liberties, which is what I think is going to start to be discussed later. And again, I hope that everyone hears that I am understanding what a difficult issue this is and trying to disagree respectfully here. Okay, next. Here we go.
I think that... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it's very different coming in response to Biden making a law that every company has to enforce this, because even if you were to take the more libertarian approach and just say, if you're within the state of Texas, you don't have to comply with that law, there might be some confusion and people would go, well, I don't want to find out that I did have federal liability or lose contracts in other places. If he actually steps in and goes, it is against Texas law, so then... Now, Texas, I don't know the way that this works from here, but apparently it's Biden versus Texas. Did Biden overstep in making his law, or is Texas, or does Biden have the authority to make such a law and Texas has to comply with it? But once that law was made by Biden, it's not good enough for Abbott just to say, hey, we're not going to enforce that here because you don't know what your liability might be with the federal government.
Okay, now that was an excellent point. Now, but we haven't heard Abbott say that's why he was doing it. But if you didn't catch the nuance of what Robbie was saying, was the perfect libertarian answer to this would be just to say, Biden, you're not allowed to do this, so we're not going to enforce it. Rather than doing the opposite by saying we're not going to allow you to voluntarily require vaccines. Perhaps that wouldn't be enough. Perhaps a company would go, yeah, you can say you're not going to enforce it, but who's going to protect me against the big bad federal government, and you just saying you won't enforce it, I mean, that's not quite strong enough. But for a company to be able to say, not only is Texas not going to enforce it, it's actually illegal in Texas to comply. That gives those business owners that don't want to comply a much stronger footing. And that is, in fact, an excellent argument. And that might, in fact, be the reason why Governor Abbott is going down this road. But that's speculation. He hasn't said that is why he's going down this road. So that somewhat concerns me. If that's the reason, well, that has another aspect to this here now. But he hasn't said that's the reason. And I just don't see applauding a authoritarian edict, even if it's doing something that we would agree with. I just think that's a very dangerous road to go down. And me personally, I just can't be inconsistent in that way. I think Dave's going to say something like weaponized autism or something, and I have weaponized autism. I freely admit it. But to me, and perhaps this just shows a lack of maturity on my part, I don't know. I find life simpler when you go, this is the principle, and I'm going to follow it. And that is the hard deontologist in me, I suppose. And, what is the saying of the hard deontologist is, do what is right, though the heavens may fall.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you hit the nail right on the head. So in theory, right, my response, and I said this when I was on Tim Pool's show, when he was asking me kind of just like in theory, would you support banning, businesses, mandating vaccines? And I basically said, I gave the libertarian answer, which is my answer. I said, no. I mean, I go, that's not even necessary. Who cares about that? I was like, no, I would just say, I would just be against any type of government interference in this at all. And that, government has absolutely no right to force people to get a vaccination, and businesses can do whatever they want to. And it's not even necessary to ban businesses from doing this because the market will take care of all of this,
Okay, that may have seemed to have been contradictory, but it's not. I think, the context of the question with Tim Pool was, in the absence of the federal government requiring businesses to, to have its employees over 100, if they have over 100 employees, be vaccinated, would you be in favor of laws banning it? And his whole point was, it wouldn't even be necessary because it just wouldn't be an issue. The whole reason it's an issue is because of Biden's mandate, that we can't lose sight of the fact, and I think this is Dave's ultimate point, that the initial aggressor is Biden. And is Abbott initiating fresh aggression, or is he being defensive? And I would say it depends, and we can't know, because he would be initiating fresh aggression if there was a business owner who wanted to mandate vaccines and would have done so regardless of anything Biden did. The problem is we don't know which ones claim they want to do so only because they feel the strong arm of the federal government. But in theory, at least, there can be businesses that would have done this anyway. And Governor Abbott is then preventing them from doing this. That is, in fact, fresh aggression. That is the issue. Now, I don't know if I'm being entirely clear here, so I would love to see in comments if you guys are picking up what I'm laying down. But I find it difficult to be applauding fresh aggression. And again, like I concede, this isn't a clean thing because the federal government has stuck its filthy little fingers into this situation. It's not easy.
When the federal government is coming in and saying, I mean, just by decree and saying that, you know, whatever it is that OSHA's gonna do this, no matter what the exact law is, saying that, you know, all these companies and big companies that have 100 or more employees have to mandate vaccines or get tested or whatever, but pretty much pushing in that direction. Now there's going to be a whole lot of companies in Texas who are like, even if you say that, will go, yeah, I know you're saying that, but the federal government is kind of pushing me in this direction. So it almost requires, in a defensive sense, someone to step up and say, no, you can't do that here. You are in violation of our state laws if you do that.
Okay, and if that's the reason, then I get it. If that's the reason, then I would be fine with it. But I don't know that's the reason. You want to know one way to solve that? And I'll tell you. The federal mandate is only for businesses of 100 and above. But Governor Abbott's, and I don't think it's even law yet. I think it's only just been suggested. Y'all can let me know. His executive order would be for all businesses. So if this was just to shield businesses that were over 100 from having to comply with Biden, then would Governor Abbott ban businesses from under 100 employees from requiring vaccine mandates? Because you can't say they're doing it just because the federal government is put them in fear. And if Governor Abbott would then say, no, even those under 100 employees are banned, then that is indeed fresh aggression that is not letting small business owners do what they want with their own business. You see what I'm saying here? And a business owner should be allowed to do that. And when you start getting with, yeah, but I don't like how they're using their freedom. So, back in the days of Jim Crow, where the government was, the local governments were enforcing segregation. Then we had federal civil rights laws forbidding discrimination. Would we as libertarians defend the federal civil rights laws forbidding discrimination in order to counteract or give a plausible out for the businesses who didn't want to discriminate because their local laws were requiring discrimination? If we wouldn't do things the same way here, is it only because we view this as a larger civil liberties violation? That could be. But I've always maintained that we don't get to judge the value of someone else's liberty. Like, you don't get to pull down the great liberty calculator in the sky. Somebody's violations to their own liberty, you don't know what value they place upon it themselves. So unless we as libertarians would be defending federal anti-discrimination laws because some local municipalities had Jim Crow laws, then I have a very difficult time doing the same thing here. I'm going to put on one of these lashes. So just give me 1 second here. Putting on lashes, gentlemen, is not easy. Just so you know. It's basically gluing something on top. Oh, that went on pretty easy. All right, let's go to the... Oh, I want to look at comments here a second. Yeah, Ned Kelly, I do believe it's a stepping stone. But do you understand, though, the point I am saying, though, if Governor Abbott's motivation is just to protect those large companies who will say, yeah, but you can say you're not enforcing it, but the federal government is saying we have to do it. And the argument that Robbie is making is that Governor Abbott could just be saying it's illegal in order to give them a way to say, yeah, but we can't obey the federal government because it's actually illegal here. Not that, we just won't enforce it. American Internationalist, that is a long story with a lot of videos on it. Perhaps some people in chat can educate you, if not at the end. Maybe I'll address it again, but this has been going on a long time.
I'm okay with that.
There's also already anti-discrimination laws imposed on businesses. So for a new anti-discrimination law to come around that's actually in my favor, like, unless you're going to unwind the other protections that other people have, you're really just extending the protections that already exist. So, for example, if they made an anti-discrimination law against conservative point of views or your political opinions, that you can't be fired from your employer because of your political views as stated online, would it be smart of libertarians to say, well, how dare you tell a business that they can't discriminate against employees? Well, those laws already exist. So why wouldn't I want that protection for myself when it's already afforded to multiple other individuals? Like, that doesn't, it just doesn't seem like a winning strategy when the other side of it's not going away.
I disagree with him there too. And I can't remember if this is an actual plank in the National Party platform, or whether I was on a platform committee that proposed it, or whether it's in the Colorado plank. Let me just get this eyelash on. But he basically said, well, if there's anti-discrimination laws, then libertarians shouldn't oppose them being expanded. Of course we should oppose them being expanded. The solution isn't to aggress more, it's to aggress less. The fact that some people are getting these protections at the force of a gun, the libertarian answer isn't to go, well, if he's getting it at the force of a gun, and we're already screwing over the business owner's rights in this way, well, then I want the business owner's rights to be screwed over for me in that way. That doesn't seem right to me. Isn't that like saying, well, if my neighbor is getting robbed to give charity or, a handout to this guy, well, I want to rob my neighbor for that much for me too, No, you're still initiating aggression. It doesn't matter that someone else is as well. That doesn't give you the right to also initiate aggression. I don't get that from Robbie at all. Whether it's a winning political move or not, I don't think our philosophy is based upon winning political moves. If we were worried about winning political moves, we'd just join the Republicans and the Democrats. They win all their elections. So that I couldn't disagree more there. I would hope libertarians would oppose expanding out anti-discrimination laws to include political viewpoints. The plank that I'm trying to remember is if it's actually in our platform or whether I just remember proposing it. It was that the solution to these alleged group rights isn't to expand the rights to more groups. It is to get rid of the rights entirely. Maybe I'm just an example of what was it Marx or Lenin that said that a capitalist will sell you the rope the communist is going to use to hang you with. But I don't think we can defend liberty by violating liberty. That reminds me of what's George Bush saying he was violating the free market to save the free market. But I do think it's really questionable, this issue, because of the dirty hand of the government with this anti-vaccine mandate thing. But I don't think it's at all questionable in that answer that Robbie gave. No. We would never, or we shouldn't, God, I would hope we would never favor expanding anti-discrimination laws to benefit us because they benefit other people. How is that any different than people saying, I'm taxed, so let's tax churches? No, the answer is to stop me from being taxed, not to tax more people. Hello, Hector. Thank you for stopping by from sunny Florida.
Well, yeah, exactly. Or you could just make it explicitly against libertarians. Like, let's just say that there was like, whatever. There's a
Being
federal,
against the Fed makes you a terrorist, and you're not allowed to have employment.
There's a federal edict that says anyone who opposes the Federal Reserve is a terrorist and should be fired. And then one state, governor says you're not allowed to fire someone for being against the Federal Reserve and being a libertarian or whatever. Would we sit there and go, well, those are both infringements on liberty, and so I don't? Or would we just go, you know what? Even though none of this is perfect, I'm kind of on the side of that guy.
I would be opposed to forcing businesses to hire somebody they didn't want to. Again, though, when you add in the issue of the state saying you have to do something, and then having a state come, a governor of a state come in and say, well, we're going to ban that ban type of thing. I agree. That is a little different. That wasn't parallel at all to the example that Robbie gave. It was not at all parallel to that example that Robbie gave. But I don't think the answer is to ignore the fact that neither of them are libertarian. I think we can perhaps pragmatically say, okay, this is an unlibertarian law, but it's counteracting this terrible thing by the government. I'm going to tolerate it, but still say it's not libertarian, rather than just going, I don't have a problem with it. I think we need to have a problem with it, even if we say, I'm tolerating it for now, type of thing. I don't think we can be silent. I think we have to be consistent with our principles. And of course, we can pull hypotheticals out of the air. I don't think we need to. We can deal with the situation that's in fact happening. Biden said you have to have vaccinated employees for 100 or more, and Abbott said, nope, I'm banning you from doing that. If his ban was only for 100 or more, I would think this would be a whole lot more justifiable. But as far as I know, it's not. So the guy who has 5 employees now has the force of the state of Texas coming down on him. If he says, my little home business here, I only want vaccinated employees. Maybe they're working out of his house. You see where I'm saying that this is not that clean?
This is like what I'm trying to get across to people, that I think some libertarians are not understanding or are willfully on the wrong side of. And to be fair, again, with all of this, I think it's the majority of people in the liberty movement are totally on the right side of this. It is the minority. And unfortunately, that includes the some people in the LNC at the top of the Libertarian Party.
Well, I'm not at the top of the Libertarian Party anymore, Dave, and I don't agree with you on this one. So, I'm finding myself defending the LNC. You just put me in an awkward position. I guess you would have to consider I'm partially on the wrong side of this. I don't think I'm entirely on the wrong side on your view. But I think you probably would think I'm at least partially on the wrong side of it. But you can't say it's because I'm on the LNC, because they threw me off. But he's going to nuance his problem with the national leadership in a bit. And it's more than just having this position. There's more to it. And I would agree with him with the more to it. But right now I'm just laughing because I'm like, well, that's one thing you can't accuse me of. You can't accuse me of being on the LNC. Oh, boy. Oh. And Ned Kelly added, and we have to add to the mix for consideration the motivation to discriminate against Purebloods has been promoted by government-funded propaganda, rewards, and threats. It does get messy when you mix the government in. So I think we can give some wiggle room maybe for these governors fighting back in this way, but I still think we have to condemn the law. Like, again, I think we can condemn but tolerate. And say condemn, but this is a short-term overreaction, and pin the original aggression on the government. Keep pointing back to the original aggressor being the government without, though, saying that the governors themselves are not also committing aggression. I don't think we can ignore that.
But when you have, right, the biggest threat to not only liberty, but to our, the basic way of life in America in my lifetime, which is the COVID regime. I think there's no doubt about this. I really don't even understand how anyone could argue about this. You have, over the last, 18, 19 months, a thing where the government, state governments, the federal government has just gone nuts on absolutely suspending any pretense of liberty existing in this country.
Sorry. Thank you, JC. All right, let me start over again. I don't think anyone here can disagree that I absolutely agree with everything he just said right there. I'm suspended from the LNC for saying what he said right there. I should be off mute now, guys. Thank you for letting me, though. I was eating and I didn't want you guys to hear crunch, crunch. So, yeah, one of the reasons I'm suspended is for saying exactly that. I said, and I pulled out the clip, that the Libertarian Party should disband if it can't speak out against what's going on with the greatest civil liberties violations in our lifetimes. Nobody can doubt that I had been the strongest voice on the national level for that issue, and they politically assassinated me for it. No one can doubt that. And what I was saying when I was muted was, by the way, Chris Lucchini lied about me at the JC hearing on this issue. He said all I did was complain and never brought forth a motion. I brought forth a motion, and I proved it. I put forth the clip on this channel that showed that I did. But let's pretend I didn't bring forth a motion. Would that mean I was wrong? No. The person who points out a problem doesn't have to shut up if they don't also bring forth the solution. There's value in pointing out a problem. You're not wrong. Just because you haven't said the solution, you just might not be the most helpful person. But sometimes the person just saying the emperor has no clothes, they're not required to sew a new suit for the emperor in order to say that the emperor is naked. Now, I did bring a motion. I did bring a solution. And in fact, the solution the National Party is using now is mine. But the fact is, you don't have to bring a solution in order to point out a problem, Mr. Lucchini. But you did lie about me. And then later, when I pointed it out, he tried to do some backpedaling. But that just irritated me where he basically, A, that he lied, but B, said that it would be okay to remove me when all I did, allegedly, was complain that the National Party wasn't doing anything, but never said what they should do. I don't have to. I don't have to. Some people aren't good at coming up with the plans. That's not everyone's talent. But that doesn't mean you can't still point it out. It's always more helpful to be part of the solution, but you don't have to be the problem solver in order to point out there's a problem. And if that's like a widespread attitude in this party, that attitude needs to die in a fire. Notice I said it was the attitude, since my words are getting taken completely out of context all the time. But I did bring forth a solution, by the way. But you don't have to do that in order to point out a problem. So I absolutely agree with what Dave Smith said. I don't regret for a second how many times I rode the LNC's ass about it. And even though they've gotten better, they still aren't great. Does anyone think the National Party is doing great on COVID? We're just happy that they've done a little tiny bit, which shows you how bad they were in the past, but they're not doing great.
Okay, they're going to mandate something that's not perfectly libertarian. Yeah, okay. But that's not, like, I just don't understand how anyone could think that. Like, what's the biggest threat to liberty? Is the biggest threat to liberty that maybe a state government would mandate that you can't discriminate against the unvaccinated? Or is the bigger threat to liberty that state governments would mandate that you must discriminate against the vaccinated?
I think that's a non sequitur, honestly. I don't think there's a great big liberty scale in the sky. Perhaps that comes from my no particular orderism, but it also comes from the fact that the calculation of loss of liberty type of thing is an individual decision, not a collective. Now, I do think that most people would collectively agree with me that these violations of our liberties, if we're going to speak collectively, are the biggest. But to any one particular individual, it might not be. To any one particular individual, the right to not run their business as they please might be a greater violation because they've bought into the whole COVID thing. They wear a mask even when they're asleep. They've gotten vaccinated 10 times. To that person, saying that they have to hire unvaccinated people, that to them would be a greater violation of liberty. So I think when when we're talking in generalities about society, we can do these like liberty calculations. But when you go down to the individual, to the business owner, we can't, because we can't know that. That's the whole premise of how central planning doesn't work and why the free market works. So, yeah, I don't think we can necessarily do that. And I might argue, while we can easily say that the government is violating liberty, and that's a great threat, obviously, but what kind of threat is it to liberty to advocate or say without protest that we're okay with using force if it's going to oppose the use of force? How does that make us any better? Like, if you have to violate your principles to save your principles, have you really saved your principles? Or have you just hoard your principles out? That's my concern. And JC, I would agree with you. It says, I do feel there's a difference between a government mandate and a ban against a government mandate. Oh, absolutely. I have no problem with a ban against a government mandate, but that isn't what this is. A ban against a government mandate is not anti-libertarian whatsoever. I would have no problem with it. And the way you would have a ban against a government mandate is to say we're not going to enforce the government mandate. But that isn't what's being done. What's being done is if somebody wanted to do this, and it isn't because of the government mandate, we're banning them from doing it. That's what's different. That's the nuance that we're missing here.
So the thing that drove me crazy is like seeing this it was even before it went into effect or anything, but just this being proposed, and all these libertarians jump on it right away, like trying to be these like autistic perfectionists, saying like, well, that's actually not perfectly libertarian either. Like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
Okay, I'm an autistic perfectionist, by the way. He's going to I think I put forth the clip where he gets into this more. Part of his complaint isn't that libertarians are protesting. Part of his complaint is that libertarians were quick to protest this, but they took 2 years on the national level to protest the initial civil liberty violations. And that I agree with him. Like the National Party got out a tweet protesting it just being proposed by Governor Abbott within a day. They couldn't bother to bid and done that with the original violations. And that I agree with him. But you can't level that accusation against me. I was just as quick on all of the issues, on all of the things.
But can we take into account the bigger picture here? Like, look, I'm not saying that's the right move, or if I was governor, that's what I would do necessarily. But at least he's fighting on the right side. At least he's banning discrimination rather than legislating discrimination. Or legislating isn't even the word. I don't know.
Well, but I don't think he meant to use the word discrimination, because we have problems with the government banning discrimination, don't we? Don't the more social justice warrior type libertarians who believe in anti-discrimination laws make this argument? So I'm not going to pick on him for using the wrong sorts of words. I know what he was meaning. I think he was meaning more of the social credit system type thing he was saying before. But do you violate liberty to save liberty? I mean, I suppose in a strictly utilitarian ethic you can, but I'm not a utilitarian. And I think there's no brakes on that. The minute you let that genie out of the bottle, it will be used for other things, even if this time. Isn't that how liberty dies? Well, we can let it slide a little here. We can let it slide a little here. And I like, though, what he said is, I'm not saying this is the best solution. And I'm not saying I would have done this if I were governor. That's where we need to focus then. Rather than saying, I'm okay with it, or I'm not going to say it's wrong, why don't we applaud the motivation? I see why he did this thing. He's not a libertarian. As a libertarian, however, I see that this is force. And can we accomplish this same objective this way? That, I think, is the right approach. Rather than getting mad at other libertarians, basically, for pointing out, this is force. I think bile's not even the right word, the ire addressed at other libertarians is a bit misplaced here. I get it, and I get it, it's not clean. Listen, again, I'm not vaccinated. I'd be one of the people, that's in big trouble here. My job prospects are extremely limited. But I just don't want to let the force genie out of the bottle. They say, it's like, I've said this. When I said they say, no, it's me. Do you remember in Game of Thrones where Tyrion said, a wise man once said, and I can't think of her name, the translator who was Daenerys's main advisor, who she rescued out of slavery, said, "Are you passing the words of I think it was her that said the words of of yourself as a wise man. But yeah, I'm just not comfortable with giving a pass to aggression, even if it's aggression used in our service, because it will soon grow larger than you can control. So, like I had said before, it's like, let's say you had a pesky relative that you wanted offed. So you invited the vampire into your house to suck the blood of the pesky relative. It will not be before long, because vampires, once invited into your home, have an open invitation to come back in before they're sucking on your neck.
Just through fiat decree, forcing it. I mean, how could we even how could that even register on your radar? And then the other thing that drives me crazy is Daniel McAdams, who is he's Ron Paul's co-host on the Liberty Report, and he had this thing that he used to say, and I think there's really something to this. I'm not saying it's 100% perfect law, but there's really something to this. And his thing was, he goes, and he's he's been a journalist for decades, and he does a lot of stuff on foreign policy. That's kind of his area of expertise. And his thing was, he goes, libertarians should never be useful to the regime.
I think that's just a nice little saying, but I don't think it has much practical use. Because, listen, if you listen to the King Pill guy enough, he'll say that if you're involved in politics at all, you're being useful to the regime. Being useful to the regime is so open-ended that I don't find that useful. I find that a trope, okay? But I question when Dave said, how can that even register? Well, it registers with me, Dave, because it's aggression. And it registers with me because I am envisioning that there could be, and I don't think this is a stretch of the imagination, an employer in Texas who has under 100 employees, so is not being threatened by the federal government at this time at enforcing a vaccine mandate, but wants it from their own free will. They would be not allowed to do so by force of the Texas government gun. And I am not okay with that as a libertarian.
So he goes, never attack the CIA's targeted enemies.
Right,
Like,
so
just
if
never...
someone was stepping in to be a regulator of the CIA, don't be like, hey, government shouldn't have regulators.
Well, yes. Well, that's a good example of it. But the way he was using it was if in 2002, say you're a libertarian, and in 2002, as the war propaganda against Iraq is building up, and you're a libertarian, and you're writing a bunch of pieces about how unlibertarian Saddam Hussein is, and you're just writing a bunch of things where you're like, Saddam Hussein doesn't give his people liberty, and he doesn't do all this and that, and he's a really bad guy. It's not that you're technically incorrect. Yeah, Saddam Hussein is a bad guy. But Daniel McAdams' point is just stop. Because who are you aiding?
Not the same thing. And even with it not being the same thing, I don't agree. I don't think you're necessarily aiding anyone by pointing out that Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, as long as you're not making a justification for war. However, it's not the same. That analogy does not nowhere near walk on all fours, because you're not saying Saddam Hussein is a good guy. So if we are going to analogize to what you're doing with Governor Abbott, you're not only not saying that Governor Abbott is committing aggression, you're actively praising. So if you want to make the analogy to this war thing, it would be to be praising Saddam Hussein, okay? The analogy just doesn't work at all. It just doesn't work at all.
it's hard exactly to decide whether you should give them the benefit of the doubt and go, you guys are really, really blue pilled, or to be, this is a little bit more nefarious than that, and you're actually trying to aid the regime.
That's not fair, Dave. Because here I am, potentially a person who disagrees with you on this issue, and I don't think anyone can accuse me of trying to aid the regime or of being blue-pilled. I think there's another option here, and it's just legitimate disagreement. And it could be that I am just too hardcore deontological, and that could be. I've been accused of that before, and that will be guilty as charged, because I am one of the most hardest deontologists that I know. Okay. I want to go to the comments here a second. And I lost my, here we go. Well, JC says, I agree that a private business should be allowed to determine, but in the current environment, is it the business doing it, or is it them reacting to the threat of regulation force from the government? Right, that is the issue. That's why I said, though, Biden's mandate is only for businesses 100 and above. So businesses 100 and below are not reacting to a threat of regulation because there is none yet. Might there be in the future? Yes. But that's why I specifically even said a really small business, somebody with 5 employees. Governor Abbott's plan would ban them from doing it. And I think we can pretty much say in that particular case, they're determining that on their own, not because of the threat of the government. And that would be aggression against that small business owner who might have the business running out of his own home in which he has an aged mother who is susceptible. And that's why he only wants vaccinated people around. There's all kinds of situations here that a one-size-fits-all just never, ever works. Now, Thunderbox, that would be a solution. Governor Abbott could say, we are not going to enforce the federal mandate here, and we are not going to allow the federal government to enforce it. And if they try, I pledge to you that the Texas State Police will be present to defend you. Perfect. I would be cheering that. I would be cheering that. That's a libertarian solution. And I agree with JG here. Our critique should be principled no matter what government does. I agree. See, that's the trouble I'm having here. To set your position always in counter of the government is irrational. But Ned, whether or not having only vaccinated employees does nothing to protect his mother, if he believes it does, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. If he believes it does. He could believe that only having employees that were blessed by the local witch doctor protected his mother, and we should then be in support of his right only to have people who are willing to submit to being blessed by the local witch doctor. So that's my problem here. Okay, let's continue.
A lot of libertarians who are real hesitant to speak up about the lockdowns and the vaccine passport and a lot of this other shit will be jumping on how non-libertarian it is to say a business doesn't have the right to fire unvaccinated workers.
He's right. Now there he's right. The National Party jumped on this quickly. But that criticism doesn't work against me. That I think we could all agree here. That criticism doesn't work against me. So I understand that Dave, has to speak in broad generalities. He can't deal with the outliers, and I'm sure I'm an outlier on this. But I do exist. And I was quick to condemn it all. Okay. So yeah, that I agree with them, but it doesn't apply to me. And Ned, we don't know he only has that belief because of the government. We don't know that. We can't, it doesn't matter why he has that belief. Fact is that he has it. A lot of people will say the same thing about religious beliefs. Oh, you only have that belief because your parents raised you in this faith, but if you were born in Saudi Arabia, you'd have a Muslim belief. Therefore, you shouldn't have protection for your religious beliefs because they're just the circumstance of geography of where you were born, and they don't have any kind of we can go down that rabbit hole. I don't think it's up to us or our business why he has the belief. It's up to him. That's why I also said the voodoo doctor one.
And the fact that I even see libertarians arguing about this stuff is kind of nuts to me. I mean, yeah, you don't have to agree. It's not perfectly libertarian, but okay, it's better. It's clearly better.
Is it, though? See, I think force is bad. Okay, and I just don't play the game. I don't like calling it a game. That's somewhat disrespectful. I don't do this force is better than this force type of things. Force sucks. And to the person who's getting the force used against them, they don't care that 100 other people might think it's better than force being used against them. Because we're dealing on the level of the individual. I would be very concerned if I didn't see libertarians pointing out that this wasn't libertarian. And I don't like the use of the terminology, it's not perfectly libertarian. No, Dave, it's unlibertarian. Let's not weasel the words around. It's not that it's not perfectly libertarian. It's that it's unlibertarian. Force is unlibertarian. It's not that it's not perfect. It's that it's not.
If someone who was really opposing the wars, like a governor or something like that, was going to say, hey, listen, we will not send our state's money to that war because we want to spend that on healthcare and education or something like that. Now, I mean, I would just support that person, even though, yes, that's not the perfect libertarian answer. And okay, yeah, you're right. We don't want the government to spend that money on anything. But you can also, like even in the libertarian world, you could recognize that there's aggressions and government policies, but that doesn't mean they're all the same.
That analogy also doesn't walk on all fours, Dave, because the money's already been stolen. So they have this money in hand, and it's stolen money already. And you have a governor saying, well, I'm going to spend it here rather than here. And you're saying, well, I'd rather have it here than here if it's going to be spent anyway. If the option of refunding it back to people isn't on the table, then of course you would rather have it spent here than there. That's not at all equivalent to what's going on here. That's just not at all equivalent to what's going on here. And I would hope a libertarian would point out to such a governor who said we're not sending our state's money off for this war, we're going to spend it on health care instead, that a libertarian would say, yeah, if you're going to keep this money anyway, yeah, I'd rather have you have it here. But how about refunding it?
Some are worse than others. And war is worse than social programs. And in the same sense, you go banning, legislating, enforcing that businesses ban unvaccinated people is worse than enforcing that they can't.
Yes and no. Over average and in groups, yeah, absolutely agree. But to the individual in which it isn't, to that individual, it isn't. And it's still using government force to violate private property. And we need to find a non-force way to do it rather than saying, well, this force is better than that force. It's not easy, and I'm not going to pretend like it's easy. But there are other ways to do it without using force. What I'm reminded of is Nozikian side constraints, right? There's a lot of different ways to do something, but you have to obey the side constraints of force. To me, a force is just a no-go. And that makes things very easy for me. I don't advocate using force. And just because the government started it, if all that Governor Abbott was doing, again, was refusing to enforce the mandates, I would be fine.
And I gotta say, it's like, I understand the libertarian allergy to state power. Well, we don't want to use state power. That's kind of the whole thing that we're against. And I get that, and I'm against that too. But I can still kind of notice what's going on, and I...
No, everything after... No, Dave, with all due respect, my mom taught me, and a lot of people's moms taught you, that when you say something and then you say but, everything before the but was bullshit. No, there's no but. Don't bring in the big butt. I don't like big butts, and I cannot lie. Oh, God. Okay, sorry. That just triggered the hell out of me.
Feel like, and maybe this will be a theme that we'll address more later on the show, but I feel like it's almost like when people want to like say like, well, that's bad, but that's bad too, and we're against all of these, state policies. It's like, do you guys not understand the moment we're living through? Do you not understand what's going on here? That this is like a really big deal and a dangerous situation? Because if you do understand that, then I think maybe you'd realize, yeah, the solution probably won't be perfect, but anyone who can take down the COVID regime, I'm willing to hear them out. And as far as abuses of state power go, just legislating, again, not legislating, or in Abbott's case, maybe legislating, but even that, using state force to mandate that people can't have vaccine mandates, I'm kind of okay with it.
I'm not okay with force. I'm not okay with force. I'm not okay with state force. I do understand it's a complicated issue, but I also do understand that in every crisis, there's always the temptation to say, do you understand the days we're living in? Do you understand the danger? We have to bend our principles here because of the exigent circumstance. And there's no brakes on that thing. Obviously not comparable, okay? We're now just going into politics and whatever. But one reason why I have some respect in some circles is because I do not bend my principles. No matter how difficult or unpopular, I just don't. And again, that's why I'm throwing off the LNC. Gotta ching. But I'm willing to say that it's complicated, it's messy. I can see how libertarians can tolerate it. But I'm never going to say I'm okay with it, because I'm not. There are other ways. If somebody could prove to me there was no other way, maybe I could bring myself to say I'm not okay. But I think there are other ways. And when we just say we're okay with this, we are encouraging the lazy use of force, because that's government's first tool out of the toolbox, is the hammer. Can we encourage them to use something other than the hammer?
And I'll tell you, even though it's not perfect by libertarian standards, you're not going to hear me spend any of my time, like in the same sense of the Daniel McAdams thing, when people, when there's drums of the drums are beating to go to war with Iran, you're not going to hear me spending a lot of time talking about how horrible Iran is, even though they are a horrible government. But when they start talking about going to war with Iran, I'm going to talk about how America is the aggressors in this situation. And in the same sense, when this stuff is going on, I'm not going to be bashing Governor Abbott. I'm going to be talking about how Joe Biden's the aggressor in this situation.
Oh, I still think we can do both, though. The initial provocation came from Joe Biden. The chain of responsibility leads directly to Joe Biden. But I think we are not educating people who really, you see, to other libertarians, they can easily see that if you're silent about it, they could see the wink, wink you put in your crossing your fingers behind the back and just choosing to ignore it. But the watching world doesn't see the consistency of libertarian principles. And if you're absolutely silent, and even if you say, this is wrong, and we're going to say the but I'm going to tolerate it. At least you've gotten the message out that this is wrong. We have to say that, or the coherence of libertarian views do not get out there. And then later, in another situation, people will remember and they'll go, but wait a minute. People are not going to trust us. They're not going to trust us with what seems to them to be this wild, crazy ideology if we're not even showing that. I got it now. There was somebody who said something to me. He was like a real radical right-winger. And I was a brand new libertarian, and he kind of twisted me in knots a little bit, you know, because they're a little bit more advanced at politics than I was. And he said some hard questions that I didn't have the answers for yet. And he said, the problem with you libertarians is you like to preach, but you don't like to taste your own wares. And that sat with me because I'm like, is that true? Are we not willing to live by what we're saying? Like, are we unwilling to face the consequences of what we're saying? And perhaps that's now why I am just so at an agony to show, no, I'm willing to live by what I preach. That force is wrong. It's wrong when it's used for evil, and it's wrong when it's used for good. And it doesn't require making a moral equivalency either. It doesn't. I see that's part of what he's fighting against, and I would agree with him. But, you know, just because you don't make a moral equivalency between a nice, firm turd, you know, that you might dump in the toilet and a messy case of diarrhea, they're still bullshit. That was a very interesting analogy in the middle of me eating. All right. Are there any more clips? I think there might be. Let me check here. Otherwise, I've got some conclude. Oh my God. How many clips do I have here? Oh, there's a few more. Sorry. Not sorry. I told you these are marathons. Tip your waitress.
And there was a push that they go, listen, we will donate money if the Libertarian Party cuts an ad right now to say, hey, we oppose this. The third big political party in America. I know everyone thinks it's just Democrats and Republicans, but there is this other one, and we are against all of this.
I'm sorry. Which side are we against? Are we against Governor Abbott? We're against
no.
mandates?
This is before Abbott. This is
okay.
just against Biden and the COVID regime and forcing people to get vaccinated.
Wait, they were going to get money for saying an intelligent thing?
Yes, that's right. So they did it, and they agreed. We'll start raising money, and it took weeks and weeks and weeks. And they put out an okay ad. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
Was it like
I
real
mean,
meek, like, hey, we think maybe this is a bad idea because it's not really that great?
it was better than you would think,
Okay.
but not as good as you would hope.
Okay. I've been kind of silent about this. 'Cause I wanted to let some time pass. No, I'm not happy with the video that National put out. It's boring. But I'm happy they put out something. But it like used stock footage. It was boring. And Dave's going to talk about this a little bit, where we'll let him just talk. But now that some time has passed, and I didn't want to feel like I was raining on anyone's parade, I'm not happy with it. I don't think anybody could possibly be terribly happy with that ad. I'm just happy they said something, which is sad.
And also just took so much time that by the time they did it, people, you know how it is today. Like, people are like, no one's even thinking about this speech anymore. They should have had it out that night. Like, all you need to do is have one dude who's good at video editing. Listen, I've had videos that have gone viral. I mean, the video I had with what's her name, that chick who was at the State Department under Obama when I was on Kennedy, it's gotten like millions and millions of hits across different social media platforms. I never cut that thing up and put it out the way it is. Someone did. Some fan cut it up and put it out, and then it just took off. I've had several videos like that.
So basically, he was saying, we need like a crack team of video creators. And I agree. National more than needs that. And we need a video studio in the basement of headquarters. Me and Spike Cohen and a bunch of different people in the libertarian world have been saying all the right shit on this for a long time. Just edit it up and put it out and be like, this is our party. That's all you have to do. You just have to have someone who knows how to do that. So now, by the way, I don't know how to do that. I just know how to talk this shit. I don't know how to edit this shit, but whatever. That's it. The point is, it's not that hard to do. But so they finally do that after weeks and weeks. But then, a lot of people will go, well, this is the problem with the Libertarian Party, is that it's just, it's like, you have to go through all these people. Everyone has to approve it. It's, it's like a thing where you can't expect them. Right. Kind of.
The irony of that.
But my point is, that's not even true. That's not even the thing. The problem is that they don't have their hearts in it.
No, well, it's both, Dave. It is a thing. The libertarian bureaucracy is real. It is a thing. I was laughing when you were talking about how many people it would have to go through. No, that is a thing. And in some sense, I don't think they have their hearts in it.
This is the problem. So they were silent about lockdowns for months and months. And they were silent until I forced them not to be about the riots all through the summer of 2020 for months. And they're silent about all this other stuff. But when Abbott passes this ban, they're right on it. Right on it all of a sudden. They're right on top of it hours later. And this is what pisses me off. Why do you take so long to come out when the obvious pro-liberty side? But if it's the other side, you spring into action. So they said this. God, the John Gruden.
Okay.
Him?
This is getting into an entirely different issue that I'm a bit too tired to deal with tonight. I really just wanted to deal with the General Abbott stuff. General Abbott, Governor Abbott. This is going to get into the issue of thick versus thin libertarianism. And this is something I think deserves my full attention and fresh. So let me just look at what clip number this is, and we will do this possibly over the weekend. So this is clip number 25 out of 27. So it's only a few more, but I want to deal with this another day. Okay, so this is going to be it for the night. I do not know if the gentleman who had asked me why I was thrown off the LNC is still in here. I don't think he is because I only saw that one comment. If you are still here, make yourself known before I sign off, because then I'll give you the short summary. Otherwise, everyone here already knows, and I'm sure they don't want to hear it again. All right, I am probably going to go downstairs. I don't know. I'm kind of tired, and record something for tomorrow evening, so you have some content, even though it will not be live, because yeah, I'm doing my seasonal job tomorrow. So thank you all for spending these few hours with me discussing this issue. It's not easy. It's not easy, and I don't even know if we came to any kind of conclusion here at the end, except for saying that I can understand how your sympathies could lie with Governor Abbott, but I don't think we should shirk away from saying it's wrong. They're both wrong, and I don't think by saying they're both wrong that you're saying they're both morally equivalent. I don't think you have to make a moral equivalence to say they're both wrong. And I don't think, though, you can make an absolute moral non-equivalence except for when you're dealing with groups of people. Because when you boil it down to the individual, those circumstances can wildly, wildly vary. Okay, everyone, that is it for this evening. Yeah, I'm tired, so we're going to go now, and I think I'm going to go record some of The Right to Ignore the State. Hallelujah and amen, right? All right, everyone, I will see you live again on Friday.
What you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.